I'm stupid about coronavirus and schools. So, how should we be handling this? We talked briefly earlier about it.
Hmm.
Um, what is the best way we should go about it? Should we do more of a hybrid system where we come in some days and we don't come in the other days? Should we do just an all virtual system, or should we just open the floodgates and go back to school and just say our prayers?
I mean, I think that there's probably not one ideal situation, unfortunately, but I think the best thing personally that I would say is
Mm-hmm.
to do as much distance learning as possible. I
Right.
think right now we're really not. I mean, we haven't really opened the schools, and the country's kind of full of
But they
coronavirus and
say the
hotspots.
kiddies, they say the kiddies don't spread it as much.
But I don't think that the science has actually said that. And so that's the problem we have. And unfortunately, somewhere along the lines, people who are up talking in the news have decided that kids can't get sick with it, which is definitely wrong,
Right.
and that they can't die from it, which is also definitely wrong. I know we just had a 7-year-old boy in Georgia die from it, and he had no underlying conditions.
Right.
So that goes to show you there's certainly no way that we can say that children have no capability of dying or
Right.
transmitting it. And there was actually a study that I read that showed, I think this was from the Georgia camp that had like some 200
Oh my
some
goodness.
outbreak, where they were also doing all of those measures. And they were showing high viral loads in people who were asymptomatic and in children. So the kids might actually be producing a lot of virus and making it easier to transmit.
Just a quick sidebar on that. Why did they even think it was a good idea to
I
have
mean,
summer camp in the midst of a pandemic? It's not like one of those things where, unless they're having camp all year long, which I don't think they're doing. I'm not sure. I'm just
right.
gonna comment and say I don't think they're doing it. So why did they just decide to themselves like, okay, usually we do this summer camp thing for a little extra money, but we're not gonna do it this year
Yeah.
because it's probably not safe.
I mean, there's no rationale in my mind about why. I think that some people just are wanting to get back to regular life, and I think potentially because there was so much in the news that kids aren't really at risk for it, that they
Right.
thought, oh, okay, this is a low risk population, so as long as we take some measures, but they didn't really take any measures. When you read about what they did, it was like all of the camp like
They didn't
staff
sing
were
together.
wearing. Yeah, no, I mean they were like the camp counselors and everybody. They were wearing masks, but then all the kids were just running around without a mask on. And so,
Right.
what is that
Right.
really going to help you do at that point? Again, it's your weakest link. I mean, I don't know what this camp is. I hope that this was going to like turn these kids into some kind of prodigies, but
I doubt it.
I don't think it was serving that great of a purpose at that point, and I don't know why people felt that was a great deal. Other than I think some people just want to get back to life, or maybe they just wanted their kids out of their house
I
for a
have
little
no
while.
idea, but
But
it's just
I
it
really, I
it
don't.
is so shocking. It's just dumbfounding. It's like
Yeah,
there's really camps going on right now. You really have a bunch of kids with no mask
right.
in one little log cabin.
Running around and doing all sorts of activities together and
Right.
sharing and what kind of like I know it's outdoor. I would assume it's outdoors, but like you said, there's cabins. But then it's like think about like the food and things they're eating in those huge.
Right.
At least that's the kind of camps I always saw, where it's like some
Right.
big room that everybody sat in and ate. And are you really cleaning things that well when you're out in the wilderness too, or at camp? Like
No.
you can't disinfect everything that people are coming in contact with. So decisions were made. I just don't know if they were the best decisions.
They're not.
But I think that just goes to show you if that happened in a camp with a limited, and they only tested like 300 some of those kids, and it was like 200 some were positive.
Right.
So they didn't even test I think it was like 600 total people were there. That's, they only tested half the people, and it was like a good portion of those people were sick with
You got to test
coronavirus. So
everybody. I don't understand why they think you can test one
yeah.
person and not the other. They all come into contact with each
Right.
other, and then they come into contact with people when they're not there.
Right.
Unless everybody's staying there.
Well, I think it was supposed. I thought it was like an
Like a
overnight
NBA bubble or
camp,
something,
or, yeah, yeah. Maybe they thought they were
The
doing
summer
their
camp
own
bubble.
bubble. But
okay.
obviously
Without the
somebody
budget, huh?
somebody came in and had it. So then there goes to show you that
Somebody
like
was
all it
coming and
takes is
going.
one person
Yeah,
or one exposure, and it lights a fire
Right,
within
right.
that. And that's how you get a hotspot essentially. And so to me, schools are like the exact same thing. Like how can you
It's probably
control?
that on steroids. 'Cause, I
Yeah.
mean, you got some schools. I know when I went to school, I think we had 2,000-3,000 kids at school
Right.
at one time.
Right.
So just imagine trying to do that on a daily basis, and then they still got to go home.
Right,
So they're
right.
still going to get exposed to whoever they go to home
Right,
to.
right. And every person in that family, and then every person that they're exposed by. So
Right.
it pretty much is just like the school is going to be a perfect mixing vessel for
Right.
everything. And whoever was, if the kid, is the carrier into a new home, but then also other people in the home are carriers into the school, essentially. So you pretty much have created a system that is perfect for transmission. And so
Right.
that's why I don't really think we should have in-person schools at this point.
But you say that, and I guess it's our responsibility to start addressing some of the concerns of parents and other people when they start talking about child development in terms of learning
Right.
and that suffering with remote learning, and also with parents that, like I said before, even with remote work, they don't have the time to also work
Right.
and teach their child. So when you speak upon just using distance learning,
Mhm.
what are they supposed to do? Like, how are they going to address those situations? And I'm not saying you're going to have the answer to this,
Right.
because it's such a situation that takes way more thought and way more dialogue between parents,
Yeah.
and teachers. And
I mean, we could make a whole video about education
Absolutely.
and how to, and especially then education in this term. And like I said, I don't think there's an ideal answer. Unfortunately,
Right,
we
yeah.
can't have the education system we had before and safety. And
Not that it was glowing.
not that it was perfect, but now we have cracks in the system that are even further
They
exposed
can't
by
learn about George Washington for the 10th time this year.
I
I'm
guess
sorry.
not. They'll have to learn something else. But I think it forces us to maybe reevaluate how we approach education and also how we're getting to everybody. And so we've had months now, right? This started in March that things started shutting down, really.
That's true.
And we're in August. So at what point, like when we're in 5 months into this thing, have we developed, are the teachers developing
still-
better distance learning? How we,
Do you think they dropped the ball on that? Because I felt like it was a lot of last minute. Well, we'll give you this time, and then we'll ask the teachers. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, wait, what were you guys doing 5 months ago when you thought that? I guess nobody thought it would be around. Maybe they thought it was going to be over
yeah,
with.
I think we all thought in March, like, okay, well, we're shutting down. And I don't know if a lot of people really had the understanding that we were going to potentially not be coming back for quite some time to what
Right,
we
I-
were doing. And so
That's true.
I think at first we thought, and we probably had a pretty good chance back in March to actually maybe like just get rid of it, or
Right.
to get it to the point where we could just have like, localized shutdowns as needed. But I think we're well beyond that point, unfortunately. So we're actually, I think, in worse shape than we were in March. So to think about opening a school now seems kind of silly. But yeah, I don't know what the communications have been through the education system. Of course, we had a lot of issues where we had, the federal government basically saying, if you don't have in-person learning, we're going to take away funding. And so you've put schools into some really difficult scenarios now where, I mean, how have teachers been able to prepare when in some cases they're being told
Like
that
they're already funded.
they're already struggling with funding, and now you're saying, oh, if you don't do in-person learning, then you're not getting money. But then, so now you've got teachers who have been preparing for in-person learning, and now what happens when we switch and say we can't do in-person learning? Have we been preparing, and what have we been doing to standardize something to make sure we have access to everybody?
Right.
And I would assume it's going to be based on local specifics, but
Yeah,
I don't
mean,
think
every area-
I don't think
every-
every school system has thought about it. Probably.
Probably not. Every area is going to be unique. I mean, if you
Right.
don't have a lot of spread, maybe you can do some type of combination
Yeah.
of distance. One of my ideas was always, I was like, high school students, I feel like at the age of 14, 15, you have enough common sense and hopefully a sense of responsibility that you're going to get your work done.
Right.
And I know maybe I'm thinking too highly of 14 and 15-year-olds,
Yeah.
but I believe in them. So I
Okay.
believe they're able and capable of doing more distance learning. And then see some of your younger kids that need more supervision,
Right.
they could probably do more with a hybrid approach.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's going to involve like not only the schools, businesses, because they're going to have to understand that their parents that have kids aren't going to be able to come in to work
Right.
every day out of the week. They're going to
Right.
have to find some other way to make that work. And it's
Yeah.
you just throw your hands up, because some people don't have jobs where they can do anything
Right.
from home.
Right.
So obviously business is not going to pay anybody for not doing anything.
Right.
Because now you got a whole nother dilemma. So
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you solve that, because there's so many issues about, unfortunately, how our government, like on a standardized level, hasn't really found the best way. And so
right.
you're going to be putting people in all sorts of scenarios that since it's so variable and there's not a standard and not a plan for everybody, then you're leaving it to the people, unfortunately, and it's not always an easy decision, and sacrifices are going to have to get made across the board, I think, and I think everybody needs
So
to
do you
get
think
on
it's
board
more of a
with that.
lack of leadership then? Is it more so the fact that we haven't had open dialogue? It's been more opposition, like, oh, we're not going to give you your
Yeah.
funding, and oh, we're not going back to school. Do you think there should be more of a discussion between to find a solution that works, or is it just a situation where parents are going to have to understand that distance learning is the only way we're going to be able to approach this right now, and so it's businesses, which is just it leads into so many other things
Right.
with unemployment and
Right.
supporting parents and
Right.
supporting those schools,
Right.
even though that they might not actually be having kids in school.
Right.
It's almost like you're gonna have to give schools more funding to have less students.
Right.
And if you were thinking about it on an economic standpoint, you'd be like, well, that doesn't make sense. We want to, give money to people that have more students.
Right.
But it's not how it's gonna work. At least I don't think it is.
Probably not. And I mean, I think one point that I feel like has to be made also is like, what are you going to be doing for your teachers who, like, in some cases, you're basically saying, okay, if we do a hybrid approach, are you going to, or have the flexibility where people can opt to be in person or not? Then what are you doing with your teachers? Are your teachers also teaching in school during the day and then also preparing virtual lectures and doing stuff outside of that? How much
Overtime.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to work double time at that point.
Right,
So,
which is ridiculous.
and on top of that, can you force your teachers to come in and have to work with even young kids when they might be at high risk? And you're asking
what are
them
the
to
average
be
ages of teachers at this point? Is it, when I was in school, I remember you had some young teachers, but most of them were probably pretty old, probably
Yeah.
40, 50 years old at least.
Yeah, I don't know the average age of
Yeah.
a teacher, but I think there's definitely, I'm sure, a lot of teachers who either are at risk or have underlying conditions potentially.
Right.
And
Well, that's
and
like America, period.
right. Yeah. I mean, and so if you look at, but to ask them to have to come in when maybe they don't want to, and you're pretty much forcing their hand too, like, and what happens when you have teachers that get sick, and
So do you think with all that, and this is, like I said, can go so many different ways, and we could have a whole show on this. Do you think we're ill prepared because we have not embraced more distance learning at the K through 12 level? Because we've done so from the college
Right,
level
right.
with online universities. Now, that hasn't always worked out because we've had those profit universities that, pop up
Right.
and disappear. And then their curriculum is not as updated.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of people don't like online degrees because you feel like you don't get enough out of it. And I think that's probably why there's such hesitancy at the
Right.
K through 12 level.
Right.
So how do you feel about that? Do you think if we had been in a better situation where we had already started to embrace online distance learning for our younger generation,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that would have been easier in terms of transitioning back into school?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think that the education system, especially for younger kids, was ever really up, it wasn't really focused on distance learning. And I think there's still a really good thought process by a lot of people that the best way is to have in-person education. And,
True.
and I'm sure there's a lot of merit to that. Obviously learning in a classroom for young children is probably a lot better than sitting in front of a TV and consuming that. It's the same reason that they say when you read an actual book or piece of paper, you actually retain it better than when you read it on a screen. So I think that there's something to be said that education happens best in person.
Right.
So I think there was never really a thought that we needed to do that, and there was never a rationale for it before, really, unless you wanted to be totally. But with universities, it's a little different, but it just isn't something that I think in the K through 12 we've ever really thought too much about online learning, because that's just not how it's been. I think that might be part of it, is that we're used to one method and we haven't really evaluated additional methods. But I think that this pandemic has basically forced us to really reevaluate how we approach absolutely everything, and how we live our lives, and how we work, and how we learn, and how we socialize.
Well, maybe they'll take this time to actually go back and evaluate the whole system and say, okay, well, maybe we don't really need to teach this. And
Right.
maybe we need to put more emphasis on this instead.
Right. Like if you can't have in-person all-day learning, you might have to cut out some of the stuff that you
Right.
don't need to cover, or you might have to change your lessons so that they cover
Right.
the things that are most important to get across.
Absolutely.
And so I hope that, this pandemic forces everybody to be more efficient and to really reevaluate, is the system that we're currently using the best system going forward? and maybe we'll learn some new things about how we can improve everything that we're doing, and improve education, improve how we conduct business, and how we live our lives. And maybe there will be some benefit to it.
And I think that's why I like my, approach in terms of having the older kids go home and do distance learning, because we have the buildings.
Right.
Especially right now, we can make makeshift schools at all these commercial buildings that don't have anybody in if we needed to. But we have overcrowded classrooms, and we don't have enough teachers.
Right.
And that's because of, how we've chosen to treat teachers when it comes to financially. Like, we've basically said we don't care about budgeting for your classrooms and make sure you have the tools and your students have the tools that they need. And we also haven't paid them adequate salary.
Right.
So when you combine those two things, you're going to get low demand when it comes to people wanting to be teachers. I mean, who wants to sign up for a bunch of work to be underfunded and to also not get paid?
Right.
Unless you have a true passion, you're probably not going to do it.
Yeah.
Or you're just, looking for a job.
Yeah.
Those are not the type of people you really want teaching.
Right.
You want people actually enthusiastic about it and actually want to do it. And I know you can get that on either side. If you pay too much money, now you just got people that's doing it for the money.
Right.
But I'm a proponent of, I'd rather you do that than do the others.
Right. Right. Well, and I think your idea of like a hybrid approach is something that has to be thought about, but I really question, like, is that really going to work for helping to protect the families? And, if you have a young child that's going in for this hybrid and then you have a teenager, that's fine. But then what happens if you have people in the home who have underlying conditions and then you have an outbreak? And I think Georgia just opened their schools and there's like some 200 kids and a bunch of staff that are already quarantined because they had a positive on the second day.
Well, I think
so
it's going to be impossible to prevent it completely unless we start doing like more of a boarding school thing where we just keep the kids there and nobody leaves it's like an NBA bubble.
Right.
And shockingly, as much as we can really look to that and say, so far, they've done a great job.
The NBA has done great, but like baseball hasn't, and
that's because they haven't been a bubble. They've been going to the clubs and nightclubs.
That's true.
They've been doing everything under the sun. So I mean, when you're doing whatever you want to because you think you can, well, now you
know what
games.
The NBA bubble has taught the American people is that when you actually follow the rules and you do the social distancing and the tracing and the testing and everybody's on board, it works 100%.
That is true.
So if you're wondering, can we do it? We can. It's just going to take the level of what the NBA bubble and how, and you see even with some of the NBA players, like they haven't done the best choices either. And so,
but how realistic is it to ask parents to be like, okay, your kid's going to be gone for 10 months out of the year, and when they come back, they'll be in quarantine.
Yeah.
It depends. Is that a realistic situation?
If you have the capability, if a school could do that and people and parents, you have the choice. I think what we've really done so far, it seems, is we're just letting the parents decide, do I want to send my kid to school or not? And that's a personal decision. I think they're just making it flexible, and it becomes down to your each personal choice. And that becomes, if a boarding school is an option and you can send your kid away and they can learn in person and they're just not home, then if you feel so strongly that in-person learning is what needs to happen, then you should be ready to then send your kid to boarding school
that may
to
be
keep
a
your family
conversation
safe.
that hasn't happened a month.
Right.
I haven't really heard a lot of people, especially in the news, talk about boarding schools.
Right.
And maybe that's one of the solutions that we're going to have to think about adopting on a larger scale in the midst of this. Of course, there's challenges because maybe normally in a boarding school, I don't really know because I've never been to one. Normally, maybe the teachers and stuff could still go home. But in this situation, even they wouldn't be able to go home.
You'd have to have like an education bubble, essentially, like the NBA. So you'd have to say, you have to agree, and maybe there'll be something where teachers can bring their family and everybody stays within that pod. You don't have them staying away from their homes.
It could be like that nursing home where the nurses end up staying. And someone they did bring their families. And they all stayed at the nursing home.
Yeah. I think that's the best way about it. If you feel like in-person learning is what you need for your
So like a live and work scenario, which we have talked about off camera in terms of how things could change if businesses would embrace living arrangements for their employees.
Right.
Which could help slow the spread.
Right. Anytime you really kind of reduce the amount of people introducing new people and you're kind of within a greater pod, as long as you kind of like, it's almost like, this term of like circling the wagons. It's like if you protect everybody within that group,
Right.
then you're fine. And as long as you keep that group protected and you're rigorous, that's like
Right.
what the NBA is doing. It's achievable to keep everybody in that safe, but it becomes hard then when you have, people kind of one person is all it really takes to
Right,
get it
right.
in there. And then once you have that, since people aren't practicing social distancing and masking, then it's everywhere. So that's why you have to be so careful about every potential.
Who would know that the NBA would be like the model, how we're going to have
It's
to
amazing.
do a lot of things. Just bunch of bubbles everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool though that it's working, and I think it just
Yeah, it
goes to
is.
show you that like if you actually do have those rules, and if the country could have gotten on board with that, we might
So
not
far.
be. Yeah, I mean, but I mean, it's been a little while now,
It
and
has.
they've
It has
actually
been
done
about
a
week
good
or so
job,
and haven't really had a case, I don't think. So
yeah, I mean, and maybe the NFL will take note,
how much money did it cost, though? I think that's the biggest thing.
but at the same time, how much money were they going to lose if they didn't have any season? So
Yeah,
there's
it's a lot.
there's going to be a trade-off, and if you can make it work and still get some of your revenue, and thankfully there's sports for people to watch,
Right.
then I think that works, and if it can be
And I think that
achievable.
could actually cut down on costs in some ways, because you think about how much money we spend on transportation when
Right.
it comes to busing students in and out and
Yeah.
other regards. I mean, of course, you're going to incur more costs too, because now instead of just lunch and maybe breakfast that was already provided, now you're talking about dinner as well. So
Right.
you're going to, it's going to be a trade-off. But I think students and kids can get back to more of a normal life, because now they can have sports and things of that nature, as long as it's within the people that's at the bubble.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting. I think that was kind of the concept with colleges too, which is like if everybody kind of goes back to their dorms and lives on campus. But
right.
the problem being there that I think it's really hard to keep college kids from
Yeah,
meandering around.
It's a
and
lot
you-
harder to keep track of people in that regard, and then
Right.
you have to be very strict with how you do things. You
Right.
got to be very deliberate and very strict. You cannot allow people to circumvent the rules, because if they do so, then it's over.
Right.